We're back again to talk more Dresden Files today. Zach has read Ghost Story, book 13 in the Dresden Files. Significant shift from the previous book. Zach, better or worse than changes for you?
Worse. Good, but worse.
Me too. Let's get to it. Hey, Jim, Zach, Fantasy for the Ages. You know the stuff. Thanks for being here. We're going to talk about some urban fantasy today. Again, Ghost Story, book 13 of Jim Butcher's The Dresden Files. This is a spoiler-light episode. If you haven't read the book yet, this might help you decide whether or not you should. We will not ruin anything. But if you have read it, there's going to be a lot of if you know, you know in what we talk about. So thanks for joining us. We hope you'll enjoy it and hit that like button down below. Somehow, first time arriving, hit the subscribe. Or maybe it's your 20th episode you've watched and we'll finally convince you. But we love subscribers. Thanks for joining us, all of you who are on board already. So yeah, Ghost Story. Quite different from the book before it.
So I enjoyed this one for some of the mechanics that are different and some of the things you got to explore with that, as well as a unique perspective from which to look at some of the aftermath from the previous book.
Yeah.
That being said, the story itself, it was okay. It was a little weaker. It was more of a way to narratively explore and explain the things that they needed to from the previous one.
Right. And one of the biggest things Jim Butcher does in this one is advance character growth. Like, characters across the board, significant changes. And we don't have to take the time to live through them.
No.
There's a time jump of about a year here.
6 months.
6 months, okay, where Harry's been gone. And suddenly he's back on the scene and seeing his friends and how they have suffered, changed.
It's really nice to see the world still goes on without Harry Dresden, but also the world was arguably better with Harry Dresden still in it. Not necessarily because of his actionable choices, though, just his mere presence. I enjoy a lot of the different where characters are moving on and like where they go from here. But it feels, if I had read the previous book and then had to wait and then read this one and then had to wait, I probably wouldn't be super happy with it, actually.
I agree with you. I'll admit, when I read this story, and I'm plowing right through them, I was frustrated a little at this. I didn't really like some of the elements of this story. And can I just get through this story at times? Now, I understood what Jim Butcher was doing with this book and finishing it and then going on to the next one. It all fits into context well. But I was a little annoyed at times here. I was like, I was feeling a little bit like the prequel of The Wheel of Time. You know, you're giving me something you want me to understand, but this isn't the book I was looking for.
If it weren't for the fact that there are really just a couple, big reveals / explanations of how and why things that happened in the previous book happened the way that they did, if those didn't exist within this book, then I would feel like Jim Butcher had sat down, wrote the next book, before writing this one, and then looked at the 2 books he had written, the one that was published and the one that wasn't, and said, nah, that's too big of a jump. There's too many differences with characters. I think we need to actually have a time and explain some of that. And so he wrote a filler book to explain, except he also sprinkled in some necessary things.
Yeah. Now, I want to clarify, when we do these spoiler-light episodes in the midst of a series, we're free to talk about things from previous books in the series. If you haven't read Changes yet, stop listening now, because we're going to reference things. That's how this works, but we're not going to ruin Ghost Story. But Changes ends with, Harry Dresden getting shot and falling off the side of a boat.
Yep.
He's dead as far as we can tell. And here we're seeing him. I mean, it says it in the title. Ghost Story.
He's not really a ghost.
Or is he? That's part of what you're figuring out in this story. What's the context? He's been gone, as you say, for 6 months. And this is just a gap of time that means nothing to him.
And we're sitting in a place where it's like, is that normal? Like, if you're a ghost that sticks around, is that normal? Does Harry get to stick around? It seems implied that he's not a normal ghost that is sticking around in normal ghost ways, because he's seemingly like...
And I love in this story where we get to see so many things from new angles. One of them is the ghost side of things.
Yeah.
Because he's interacted with ghosts before, especially through a particular character. You remember his name?
Mortimer.
Yeah, Morty. And Morty comes into play here too, but a very different approach to it.
Technomancer.
And Harry gets to interact with ghosts, and it's delightful. I mean, that's a really good part of the story. Really enjoyed that.
There's some revisits of a couple of characters that we thought we didn't have to worry about anymore, but we do. And some of those are more interesting than others. There's some introductions of new characters, organizations, and things. At the end of the last book, there was a big vacuum, and we get to see what's kind of filling it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a pretty sight.
The world, the series, has taken a turn for the darker.
Which is wild that it's like, yeah, we fixed the war, and it made things worse.
Yeah.
But it does go to show fixing a war through negotiating peace is a good solution for the future. Fixing a war by completely destroying your enemy, maybe not the best solution.
Now, there are some changes to the world of Harry Dresden that are pretty significant. And, some of the ones that I liked or was most like, whoa, by the change that takes place in his apprentice. She's got a very different persona when we come to this story now. This is not, she got herself involved in the battle. It changes. And she knew this was maybe not a good idea. And now we see the impact.
One of the biggest things that we never really get, at least in the main core books, a good understanding and feeling for is her being sensitive, psychically sensitive.
Yeah.
That she feels things more than other people. And that kickback, that backlash is something that we talk about it happening, but we don't ever, especially up to this point, understand how that comes into play.
And this book does a nice job with that.
It at least shows more of it.
And I like what we eventually get more pieces behind what's happening with Molly there that made some sense. I liked it. It was good.
And before reading the book, not all those pieces are necessarily something that you put together. I do think you put it together faster than Harry does.
As usual.
But also, in this case, he has an excuse to not be putting it together as fast as he should.
What happened to Harry's old domicile? I just started laughing at that one.
Yeah. Feels about right.
Yeah, so that's a moment. The way the old gang has bonded together with Harry's absence. Some people really taking a new role, especially Murphy.
Well, I mean, she did get fired.
And then Butters and his role.
Butters, I think, is one of the biggest changes. It is a good change for expanding his role, period, especially in the series. But it is also one of the least just like, oh yeah, of course that would happen. Everyone else is like, yeah, that would happen. It's maybe not the which direction you wanted to go, but it would happen. Butters is like, ooh, Jim Butcher saw an opportunity to increase someone's role within a series. And he did it.
And that's really a fun one because, I think as I've mentioned in the past, Butters was never intended when first used to become what he has become.
People just liked him.
People liked him and Jim Butcher rolled with it. Yeah. Bob has a delightful role to play. We have not seen a lot of Bob in some of the books.
We've seen a lot of Bob in some of the books.
And we see a lot of Bob here. Bob has a prominent role to play, interacting with the characters and just Bob of his own.
You know what? Bobs do have a prominent role in this book.
Well said. Well said. And then, finally, we're going to get to the ending of the book, and oh, so that's what's going on. And I liked it. I liked the resolution.
I didn't.
You did not. Interesting.
The initial, hey, this is what's actually going on, yes. The how circumstances, yes. I'm going to say 2 words and you'll know what I'm talking about. 7 words. That I thought was, while intentional, it was definitely put in there. It was definitely this was planned. It felt a little small and cheap. It was partially because I'm sitting here going, yes, but that doesn't feel like it would do enough to allow. It's like people really had to bend rules to make this actually work out the way it does. And it is kind of aware that it's yeah, we're bending the rules, but we can't break them. And I feel like it was Jim Butcher intentionally planning and putting in a little bit of a cop-out. It's not a cop-out because it was planned.
I mean, it's literally a Deus Ex Machina.
But it feels a little cheap.
It worked for me. I was like, okay, there you go. Now I see. So I get your perspective on it. I was okay with it.
To me, it almost feels like there was always a plan. And it's
well, I don't know. There was always a chance, I think is where I go with. Not there was always a plan necessarily, but there was always a chance. Because it could have not worked out. It could have. The very end, then we see we're set up for the next book. It's not just, okay, now this story is over and everything's going to go back to normal. There is no going back to normal. That's something this book is driving home, I believe. We have changed the Dresden Files universe permanently. It's not this interim book, and now let's pick up where we left off. Nope. People have changed. Times have changed.
Will continue to be different.
And you mentioned, we've got some new elements added in here, including, at least one new really bad element introduced here. We've already had some other elements looming out there and things, but now there's something new that's really bad. It's okay, we got rid of one really bad and we've replaced it with something badder, it looks like.
What comes of that and whether or not I care, well, we'll have to wait till later book reviews.
That's right. That's good enough for today on Ghost Story. Again, if you liked this, be sure to let us know and hit that like button. And we welcome your comments. We do reply. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next time.